Hello, this is Resilience Radio, and I'm Irvin Eisenberg. As always, the opinions on this show are not necessarily shared by me. I like to feature a variety of different perspectives. Additionally, none of this is meant to be medically diagnostic or prescriptive in any way. Today's episode is a follow-up with Eric Jacobson, who is a lecturer at Harvard and has a PhD in medical anthropology, as well as being a Rolfer who studied directly with Ida Rolf. This episode will be talking a little bit about his graduate work in Tibetan meditation and its relationship to Rolfing and his own practice. So could you speak a little bit to your meditation practice and how that's affected and overlapped with the Rolfing work?
Well, when I was a drug-taking hippie at University of California, Berkeley, Maharishi came to town, the Beatles yogi, the Beatles guru. And he gave a talk in the Berkeley Civic Center. And these anarchist hippies would stand up and shake their fists at him and say, you're just part of the motherfucking power structure. You just want us to, they were Marxists, and Marxist thing was religion was the opiate of the masses. And how much they shouted at him, he wasn't the least bit upset. He was completely calm. He said, oh no, I just want you to be happy. And I was very impressed with that. He was completely unflappable. I said, I got to learn to do this. So I went and got initiated. And then shortly thereafter, I flunked out because I was doing too many psychedelic drugs. And the TM centers had this process called checking, where after you learn to do it, you could go back and have someone check your meditation. So I went back to get checked, and I said to the guy, I started meditating a few weeks ago, and I just got kicked out of the university. And then one of the most brilliant interventions I've ever heard, the guy said, wow, you started meditating just in time, which I thought was brilliant. But TM was very, very calming. There are volumes of research on its effects. And then, as I said, Chogyam Trungpa started this center in Vermont, and he had a center in Cambridge. And my friend and I used to go there. I don't know why we were interested. I guess because Trungpa's writings were very popular. He wrote these books about meditation that were very Western in tone, talked psychologically, so you could understand it if you had no background in Buddhism. And then we switched to doing his kind of meditation, which was mostly just sitting with the breath. So I did that for a while. And then those, as I mentioned before, we ran into these two much more conventional lamas in Western Massachusetts and became their students. And they eventually attracted a group of around 30 or 40 people. And we founded a little meditation center in Western Massachusetts. It's still there. And they taught much more traditional meditation, with prayers and chanting mantras and visualizing different forms of the Buddha. So that has gotten deeper and deeper for me. That's sort of the center of meaning in my life at this point, because I've been doing it for I think we met him in 78. So 45 years. And it benefited me so much that I always ask my Rolfing clients, do you have any kind of meditation practice or prayer practice or spiritual practice? And some of them do, some of them don't. Then if they say they don't, I say, I'd be happy to show you something if you're interested. I'm very careful not to push it. Some of them are interested, some of them aren't. Then I show them a simple Tibetan practice, simple mantra and visualization. And some of them really get into it and it becomes a thing they do, and some of them don't, and I don't push it. But it's been very helpful to me, not just psychologically and spiritually, but physically. A lot of physical stuff changes when I meditate. Partly, I think, because the Tibetan practices involve visualizing energy inside your body and exchanges of energy between enlightened beings and you. In Tibetan Buddhism is not just the Buddha. There are many other kinds of enlightened beings that can help you. And some are peaceful, some are wrathful, and they're different colors of light. So they're really into colored light, and they're really into imagining that that these deities are blessing you by sending colored light into your body, or into your chakras. And it sounds a little woo-woo, but if you do it every day for years and years and years, it starts to be pretty vivid, and it starts to alter your experience of your body. And I think it helps release a lot of stuff. So that's how I think about that relationship.
And having received Rolfing yourself, and in what ways do you see any parallels between the transformation you've gone through when you go through when you get Rolfed and this practice you have?
A lot of the same stuff. I think that a lot of the changes that happen physically are releases of fascial tension when I'm meditating. Sometimes emotional stuff comes up, but that's true of any meditation tradition. And Ida's idea about verticality and symmetry. I mean, when you meditate, you're supposed to sit up straight. Straight, of course, is gravity. And I find that the more I sit up straight, the more happens in my body. So to me, they're very complementary. To me, the only problem is when I first got into that combination, I would get Rolfed, and then I would sit and do TM, probably too much. And more stuff would come up till eventually I would start to feel overwhelmed with emotional stuff, and I would back off. I would just stop for a month or two. Then I would start again. I mean, it's a very potent combination, body work and meditation. Especially, I think, meditation that involves visualizing energy inside your body.
I've had the opportunity to work to do a structural integration series with someone who had been a Tibetan monk. And there was, when I'd come across certain parts of their body where there might be a little scar here or something, I'd go, oh, you got a little scar here. And as and having some of the scar training I had from Sharon Wheeler, in addition to the structural integration training, I would ask a little bit more about that. And I heard this sort of gruesome story as to how that scar was made, but it just didn't match the fairly innocuous little scar that was there. And there wasn't it was interesting that this person just there wasn't an emotional trauma waiting to the scar. It was like, oh, this tissue is is just a little scar that I can work with a little bit and it helps, but it didn't feel like it had these deep roots that most people with that story. And I was thinking about when you were talking about in the main interview, the working with these refugees that didn't seem to have PTSD. That when you were expecting that there's just seemed to be a different processing of trauma that went along with this particular person's meditative practice.
Yeah.
And
that matches up.
At the same time, this person was seeking me because they realized that they weren't as present in their body as they could be. They were they weren't holding on to traumas, but there was a lack of grounding isn't quite the right word. I think embodiment in their current body, so to speak, that they were trying to embrace more and be more aware of. I was curious if you could speak to that in your personal experience, in what ways that does or doesn't match up.
I haven't worked on that many Tibetan monks. But yeah, I mean, especially one thing is if they're real serious, they spend a lot of time sitting cross-legged in lotus. So their hips get narrow and outwardly rotated and they get low back pain. So that's one typical problem.
I don't know where it came from, but I like the quote, "Your best posture is your next one," that we're beings that are meant to be moving and
right.
fluid. And to me, the idea of a static meditative practice is slightly at odds with my sort of paradigm of what balance and harmony in my body means. And I'm curious how that sat with you.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of meditation traditions have a movement component. In Zen, they do walking. In Tibetan Buddhism, they do prostrations. But I mean, there's probably Tai Chi people who will disagree with me, but I don't think ultimately you can get as deep into your self when you're moving as when you're sitting. I mean, sitting isn't motionless, really. There's a lot of little movement happening. I think if you could get enlightened from moving, I mean, Buddhism started in 600 BC. I think they would have discovered that by now. It definitely helps.
And so somehow reminds me of the Einstein quote. I think that he was asked what he knows for sure about the universe, and he paused and said, "Well, something's moving."
No, that's a great one.
So even when you're sitting, something's moving.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, did you have any more you wanted to share about that practice or Rolfing?
I don't think so. I think I think that's good that we included that, Erving.
Yeah, and I'm look forward to keeping up with your research work, and thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for listening to Resilience Radio. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, one of the easiest ways you can help out is to like this, give it a 5-star review on the podcatcher of your choice, and that'll really help other people have an opportunity to listen to the show as well. The music is brought to you by Aaron Marcus with their tune Some Biological Process. You can check the show notes for full credits on that. I hope you enjoyed listening to Resilience Radio. Take care.